Hello, and thanks so much for joining me here for another episode of Storytime. Today's story is from my collection, Peripheral Visions and Other Stories. And the story is called Accidents Will Happen. The morning papers were full of the story. Cyanide killer claims another victim. Stomach remedy, definite link. Catherine carefully dumped the coffee grounds onto the center of the front page, and then folded over the four corners, making a neat bundle. Robert didn't like to read the morning paper. He said it made him angry. All those stupid stories about people being robbed or killed or both. Although Catherine sometimes privately wondered if Robert wouldn't be just as angry, even without reading the news. She carried the bundle of paper to the trash bin, wincing a bit when she raised the lid. Her shoulder was still sore, although the bruise had nearly faded. At least it wasn't her face this time. It was difficult to find makeup that would conceal scratches and bruise marks. Catherine didn't read the paper very much herself. She didn't like the stories about violence, didn't approve of violence, especially when it led to someone's death. Except maybe during a war. Although it had been a war that had given Robert those violent tendencies, as a psychiatrist's report had called his rages. But when she read the report, Catherine noticed that the typist had left the N out of the word violent. From that time on, she always pictured an angry Robert, surrounded by purple clouds, as he himself turned a darker violet. Now, accidents, on the other hand, while Catherine didn't like the idea of anyone dying, accidents did seem the best way. No one to blame, just lady luck, or fate, or the odds not being in your favor. Sometimes people were sorry when someone else died, but other times, Catherine thought the deaths must have seemed ordained by Providence as the perfect solution to an impossible situation. These poisoning stories, Catherine wasn't sure if they fell under the murder or accident heading. Sometimes it was blamed on a mechanical malfunction or failure in the quality control department. But other times, it was a deliberate attempt to murder total strangers, with the chances of death evenly distributed between the lucky and unlucky consumers of the product. How many people would this latest crime claim, Catherine wondered? How many would awaken with a hangover and take a dose of medicine and never have a hangover again? How many would fail to read the article in the morning newspaper before opening the bottle and ingesting the fatal dose? Catherine herself had been very careful, not wanting any accidents to happen in her home. She had marked down the lot number on the list she kept hanging inside the kitchen cabinet door, and then had checked the stock in their medicine cabinet. The antacid was there, its lot number matching the one in the paper. And she brought it downstairs. She did this every time. Like the time the aspirins were found to be laced with strychnine, that was lot number 4300. Or the name brown coffee holding bits of ground glass, lot 66441. And the can of mushroom soup with a touch of acid. Oh, poor mushrooms, Catherine thought at the time, as she added the information to the ever-growing list. They were always being blamed for something. So that is just a brief excerpt from Accidents Will Happen. It's a little black humorous. If you are familiar with the old Twilight Zone show, the old Alfred Hitchcock shows, where things are not quite the way you think they are. You start watching the show and little by little you realize your initial idea of who was the good guy, who was the bad guy, what was going to happen or what wasn't going to happen, becomes subject to change. And in this particular instance, I remember when I first started working on the story, that phrase, accidents will happen. You know, it was something my mother used to say, you know, if something went wrong, a car got a flat tire or whatever. Well, you know, accidents will happen. It was a way to reassure us that, you know, whatever happened, okay, it was just an accident. You didn't do it deliberately. It was just an accident. It was supposed to be comforting. And I wanted to take that initial concept of an accident and kind of turn it on its head. So, you know, there was a time, and sometimes it still happens, but there was a time when there was a lot of issues with foods and over-the-counter medicines being tampered with. That was how that whole tamper-resistant thing came into play. And you know, you think, well, she's being cautious. You know, she's reading the article, she's noting the lot number, she's checking her supplies, she's removing them. But what she doesn't seem to be doing is discarding them or returning them to the store or doing any of the other things you would think to make sure that they don't fall into the wrong hands. Or is she just making sure that they're staying with the right hands? Well, I'm not going to tell you how the story ends up. You'll have to read Accidents Will Happen. Odd little story, like so many of mine are. A little funny in a way, in an odd kind of way, but I hope you will be sufficiently intrigued by the idea of Catherine and Robert, and as she refers to them, the violet tendencies that her husband has. Anyways, I hope you'll be sufficiently intrigued that you'll want to read them and the other stories that are in Peripheral Visions and other stories. And let me know what you think. If you found them amusing, thought-provoking, if it made you go check your pantry closet and your medicine cabinet a little more carefully than perhaps you had done before. Thanks so much for joining me here for today's story time, and I look forward to sharing another story with you the next time we get together.